Now, the next lesson of this course has to deal with my favorite musical element, rhythm. Now, depending on who you ask, rhythm can mean many different things. If you ask a dancer what is rhythm, they will give you one answer, and if you ask a sonologist what is rhythm, they will give you a different answer. If you ask a musician what is rhythm, they probably won't know, and if you even just Google the definition of rhythm, it's not really the right answer. So, it's unfortunately, the word almost doesn't mean anything. However, fortunately, you're watching one of my videos, and I happen to know what rhythm means. Here's what you have to remember. We cannot confuse the concept of meter with rhythm, and in this lesson we're going to be talking about both. So rhythm and meter are not the same thing, and one of the reasons why the definition of rhythm is so confusing is usually when you ask people what does rhythm mean, they will usually start describing something that sounds like meter, okay? By meter, I mean time signatures. So, let's start by talking about meter, and then we will come back to rhythm. Meter is how we organize pulse, okay? So you could describe meter as an organization of repeated pulsations, okay? And they are organized in strong beats and weak beats. So let me show you an example. So I'm going to use the piano as a drum for a second. And for you musicians out there, I want you to try and figure out what time signature or meter I am tapping right here. Ready? Is this 3/4, 2/4, or 4/4 time? If you answered 4/4, you're wrong. If you answered 2/4, you're wrong. If you answered 3/4, you're also wrong. This was not a time signature. This was me being weird and smashing my hands against the piano lid. Now, let's try that again. I'm going to do something different, and I want you to listen and ask yourself, is he tapping in 4/4, 3/4, or 2/4? Let's see if this changes things. That was 4/4 time. And the difference between the first thing I did and the second thing I did was I added beat emphasis, okay? Meters all have their own beat emphasis, and different meters have different ways of emphasizing groups. But every time you see a time signature, each time signature implies its own beat emphasis. So, the first one, I was just tapping. All my taps were equal. The second time, I did strong, weak, medium, weak, strong, weak, medium, weak, strong, weak, medium, weak. And that happens to be the beat emphasis for 4/4 time. Strong, weak, medium, weak. So if you're playing a piece of music in 4/4 time and you're just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 like a robot, maybe you should reconsider your career path. You need to think in your head, 1 is always the strong beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Same thing. Tell me what time signature this is. If you guess something in 3, like 3/4 time or 3/8 time, you're right. And we know that because beat 1 was the strong beat. Strong, weak, weak. Strong, weak, weak. Beat emphasis for a meter in 3 is strong, weak, weak. And of course, 2/4 would be strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak. So meter is reoccurring pulses, but they have beat emphasis within them. And we, in a few minutes, are going to learn which meters have which beat emphasis. And you do have to memorize which meter has which beat emphasis in order to properly write a theory exam. And especially if you're going to do something like conduct or something ambitious like that. So that's meter. Rhythm, we can describe rhythm as the diverse activity within each pulse, okay? So we play a piece of music, and the pitch and the music and the musical gestures are organized within the meter, but the diverse activity is rhythm, and it takes place within the pulsations. And it has to be organized that way as such. And for a lot of this video, the most challenging part of this lesson is going to be learning how to organize rhythm within a meter so that it's easy for the musician to read. That's a key component of of what they're trying to teach you on your level 5 RCM exam, and also of just being a music theorist, and or if you're going to be a composer, or if you're going to engrave music, knowing how notation is supposed to appear on the page so that it's easy and simple to read and it doesn't aggravate the performer trying to read it is a very important skill. And we're going to learn that today, in particular in relationship to rests. Okay, there are two types of meter. There's simple meter and compound meter. Simple meter is when the pulsations are subdivided into groups of twos, okay? There's even amounts of beats in each pulse. Compound meter is when each beat or each pulse is subdivided into groups of threes, okay? So I'm gonna clap beat emphasis of 4/4 times strong, weak, medium, weak. Strong, weak. Now I'm gonna speak and subdivide that into twos. I'm gonna go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. There's 2 words for each pulse. I'll do it here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I'm gonna clap 4 beats again, except I'm gonna start speaking in threes. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the speed of my clapping hasn't changed, but my subdivision, which I'm representing by speaking for now, has changed. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's simple meter, or I can do compound meter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we have simple meter and compound meter. For this course, 90% of the questions are going to be in simple meter. With one exception, we are going to be looking at the compound meter 6/8 time. Okay. We are also, aside from looking at meter, we also are going to review triplets and dotted notes. And some of you guys might know what that is, and some of you might not. A triplet is often used in compound meter when a composer wants to write a subdivision of threes on a pulse, but the meter isn't designed to represent groups of 3, so they have to write triplets instead, and we're going to take a closer look at that on the whiteboard. And dotted notes we will be looking at on the whiteboard as well. A dotted note is when we want to extend a note value by half of its length. So if you write any note and put a dot right beside it, the dot represents half of the note you just wrote, half of whatever came before it. Okay? Now, and again, I've said this before, the most challenging part of this lesson is going to be how to fill in rests in measures of music where there's empty space on your exam and there's a question that says fill in the rests underneath the bracket. This is a challenging thing. I'm going to write lots of diagrams over when we get to the whiteboard, but for now I'm just going to tell you the basic rules. Here are the rules for filling in rests. When you are working with subdivisions of 2, both subdivisions can be attached in a single rest. Hooray. 3s are a little bit more difficult. When you are working with a subdivision of 3 groups, the front 2 in the group of 3 can be attached into a single rest. The entire group of 3s can be attached into a single rest. However, the back 2 subdivisions cannot be attached in a rest. Why? Because it's hard for the musician to read, and we'll look at that later. And the last one today, we're going to be looking at dealing with subdivisions of 4s. Here's the rule for grouping subdivisions of 4s into rests. You can group the front 2 of a group of 4 into a rest. You can group the back 2 of a group of 4 into a rest. You can group the entire thing, the entire group of 4 into a rest, but you can never ever attach the middle 2 pulses in a group of 4. You're not allowed to. You have to make separate rests for those. That sounds really complicated. Again, I will show you in a minute. Now, I'm going to teach that rest grouping concept with diagrams over on the whiteboard, and I designed it to have a visual aspect. If you are watching this and you are a more advanced student, you might not need my diagrams. All you need to know is that you are not allowed to attach groups that start on a weak beat, okay? So if you are an older student and my diagrams don't feel quite right for you, you can just remember you're never allowed to attach beats. You're never allowed to attach subdivisions where the first pulse of the subdivision starts on a weak beat emphasis within the meter. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, I will show you on the whiteboard. Let's go over there now. So now we are going to do work at the whiteboard, and I'm going to show you how to fill in rests, and we're going to talk about everything we just talked about at the piano, but actually we are going to see it here. However, before we even start looking closely at time signatures and filling out rests, we have to, just as a review for some of you, go over some strange notation figures that may confuse you when you're actually doing your homework. So for some of you, you might already know this, but for those of you who are in line with the RCM's curriculum, these are new concepts. So we're just going to go over them quickly, and then we'll get to the serious analysis of meter and filling out rests and stuff like that and groupings. So first let's just look at these figures. So on this side of the board I've written out a bunch of tuplet figures, and on this side of the board I've written out a bunch of dotted figures. Now, we can't get these confused. There's a lot of 3 groupings around this, but they're very different, so I want to go over what they are. So, we have all sorts of tuplets in music. There are quintuplets, there are duplets, there are triplets, septuplets, stuff like that. For this course, all you need to know is triplets, and luckily triplets are the easiest one to figure out their note value, because there actually is an integrated pattern with all of them, and I'm going to show you what that is now. So, here's how to figure out the note value that is equal to the triplet you are looking at. Ready? The note value of the triplet that you are looking at, of which it is equal to, is one note value higher than what the triplet is built out of. How do I say that in an easier manner? Whatever triplet you're looking at, the note value of which it's constructed, all you have to do is go up one note value higher and choose one of those, and that's what it is equal to. It will make more sense when I show it to you on the board. So, the first one is a 16th note triplet. What is this made up of? 16th notes. Now, we have to ask ourselves, what is this equal to? How long is this actual figure? And the answer is, you have to ask yourself, what is one note value greater than a 16th note? Or what is one rhythmic value greater than a 16th note? And the answer is an 8th note. An 8th note is the next note value higher than a 16th note. You take one of those, and that's what this triplet figure is equal to. So a triplet 16th is equal to 1/8 note. Okay? So we asked ourselves, what is this made up of? It's made of 16th note. It's made up of 16th notes. What's one greater than a 16th note? An 8th note. Therefore, the 16th note triplet is worth 1/8 note. Let's do the next one. What is this triplet figure made up of? This is an 8th note triplet figure. And we step back and we ask ourselves, what is the next note value up from an eighth note? And the answer is, obviously, a quarter note. Therefore, this triplet note figure, made of eighth notes, is worth 1 quarter note. Okay? Here's a quarter note triplet figure. It's made up of quarter notes, so we ask ourselves, what is one note value greater than a quarter note? And the answer is a half note. Therefore, a triplet quarter note figure is worth a half note. 1 half note. Now down here, we have triplets made up of 3 half notes. We ask ourselves, what is one note value greater than a half note? And the answer is a whole note. Therefore, this triplet figure made up of half notes is worth 1 whole note. These are the triplet figures you will most likely see if you're going to take a grade 5 or a level 5 RCM exam. However, there's one more in the book that's very rare, and I wouldn't tell you. I wouldn't even bother showing you what it was, except that there's a vague reference to it in the textbook, so I might as well go over it, although you're very much not likely to see this triplet whole note figure on an exam, but we will show you what it is. So, this is a triplet whole note figure. Now, we ask ourselves the same thing, what's one note value greater than a whole note? And now some of you are thinking, there is no note value greater than a whole note. So what do I write? Actually, believe it or not, there is one more symbol that represents 2 whole notes. It's called a breve, and it looks something like this. It's also known as a double whole note. It looks something like this. You write a whole note, and then you write 2 lines beside it, and that is actually worth 8 quarter notes. Another way of writing it is something like this. You write a rectangle instead. So that is called a breve, or a double whole note. And believe it or not, that is one note value greater than a whole note. If you're a pianist, which I assume most of you are, we almost never see this in piano music. If you're an early musician, you might have seen this more often if you're singing Palestrina or Renaissance choral music or stuff like that. But generally speaking, you won't come across this on your theory exam. You probably won't, but it's in the textbook, so I showed you anyways, just in case. So there's a small chart of triplets, just to review. A triplet is equal to 1 note, that is, of the next greater note value to what you're actually looking at. So 16th note triplet is worth an 8th note, an 8th note triplet is worth a quarter note note triplet is worth a half note triplet is worth a whole note, and a whole note triplet is worth a TIE fighter from Star Wars. And if you haven't seen Star Wars, don't bother, because Disney ruined it. It's too late for you. Okay, so now let's look at dotted notes. What is a dot? Listen, a dot is equal to half of whatever came before it. I'll say that one more time. A dot represents half the note value of whatever came immediately before it. Let's look more closely at what I mean by that. We will start out with this dotted whole note. So, I know if you cut a whole note in half, you get 2 half notes. As such. So there are 2 half notes in this whole note. So this is worth 4 beats, and this dot is worth half of whatever came before it, and what came before it was a whole note. So this dot, right now, is equal to half a whole note, and half of a whole note is a half note, obviously. Therefore, what we're looking at actually is 3 half notes compressed together in one symbol. So this is actually equal. The timing of this symbol is actually equal to 3 half notes that have been tied together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 4 quarter notes in there. So a dot is half of whatever came before it. In this case, this dot is worth a half note. Let's look at this symbol. I'll say it again. A dot is half of whatever came before it. So, in this case, let's figure out what half of an 8th note is. Half of an 8th note is a 16th note. So there are 2 16th notes in this 1/8 note. There they are. I wrote them down so you can see. And since this dot is half of whatever came before it, this dot represents 1/16th note. So what we're actually looking at here is a figure that has 3/16th notes compressed or smushed inside of it. So the note values, you're actually holding this for a length of 3/16th notes when you are playing your instrument, which might sound like 3/16th notes tied together. Dot is half of whatever came before it. Half of an eighth note is a 16th note. Now let's do this one. A quarter note figure. A dotted quarter note. Same thing, a dot is half of whatever came before it. Half of a quarter note is an eighth note because 2/8 notes make up a quarter note. Here's 2/8 notes here just so we can see. So these 2/8 notes are in that quarter note, and then the dot is an extra eighth note, which is half of that. So what we're actually looking at here are 3/8 notes tied together in one symbol. And you can see why these are important, right? If you're playing your instrument or playing music, this is a ridiculously hard thing to read and count. It's much easier to have dotted figures and just know what they are rather than having to write ties everywhere. And the last one we'll look at for today is a dotted half note. One more time, a dot is half of whatever came before it. So half of a half note is a quarter note. So we see beside, I will draw 2 quarter notes. Now this dot is worth 1 quarter note because that's half of that. So what we're actually looking at here are 3 quarter notes tied together. There's a lot of 3s on this board. 3 half notes, 3/16ths, 3/8, 3/4. And over here there's more 3s. 3/16ths, 3/8, 3/4 notes, 3 half notes. But they're very different. These things operate in very different ways. This is a subdivision of a beat we know. This is usually a subdivision of a main group or a main beat within the meter you're working with. And this is usually an easier way of writing ties or grouping together notes for the note value that is easier for the musician to read. So don't get these two things confused. Okay, good. We reviewed, so now we can actually look at meter. So let's figure out what these numbers actually mean, what the numbers in a time signature or meter actually represent. The top number of the meter usually represents how many beats are in each bar, and the bottom number usually represents what note gets the beat. Okay, what type of note gets the beat. So we'll start in this column here, 2/8. If you have a piece of music that has a 2/8 time signature, that means that there are 2/8 notes in each bar. Okay? So one bar of music has 2/8 notes in it. 2/4 means that there are 2 quarter notes in each bar. A 4 represents a quarter note. So 2 quarter notes. 2/2 means that there are 2 half notes in each bar. So each one of these time signatures has 2 pulses in it. Strong, weak. So the first one would be strong, weak. Strong, weak, strong, weak. Strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak. Okay, so from the audience's perspective, these meters might all sound the same because essentially they're in 2, but for the musician reading them, the note value is different. So how can we subdivide 2/8 further? Let's see. So 2/16 notes go into 1/8 note. So if you want to subdivide that one level further, you could do that. If we subdivide this one level further, we get 2/8 notes. And down here, if we broke those in half, we would get 2 quarter notes for each beat. That's the first level of subdivision. So 2/8 would be 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. This would be 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So again, they sound all the same, but the notes, the rhythmic notation we've chosen to represent the pulse has changed. So that's the groupings for that column. Let's move over here to the threes. So we have 3/8 time, 3/4 time, and 3/2 time. So the top numbers mean the same thing, and the bottom numbers mean the same thing. The top number, the 3 in this case, means the amount of beats in a measure, and the bottom note tells us which note is getting the beat. Okay, so 3/8, 3, there are 3/8 notes in each bar. So 3/8 notes, 3/4 notes, or sorry, 3/4 means that there are 3/4 notes in each bar, and 3/2, 3 half notes in each bar. Okay? And the beat emphasis for all of these is the same. Strong, weak, weak. Strong, weak, weak. Strong, weak, weak. So that would be strong, weak, weak, strong. That's how that would be emphasized if you're performing these measures. And we'll subdivide one level further for fun. So, one level of subdivision further, if you break all of these 8s into 16ths, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3, strong, weak, weak. If we can subdivide these into 8th notes. So that'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and then if we are subdividing 3/2, that would be broken up into quarter notes. One and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So that's this column, and the last column is 4/8, 4/4, and 4/2. Same thing. Top number represents the amount of beats, and the bottom note represents the type of note that gets the beat. So in the case of 4/8 time, there are 4/8 notes in every measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4/4 time, there are 4 quarter notes in every measure. 1 quarter note, 2 quarter note, 3 quarter note, 4. 4/2, 2 represents a half note. There are 4 half notes in every bar. I messed up that half note. One half note, 2 half note, 3 half note, 4 half notes. Okay? And the beat emphasis for 4/8 time is strong, weak, medium, weak. 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 Strong, weak, medium. Okay, and if we subdivide that further, we can break it down into some of the groups we may be using on the fill in the rest questions. If you break up 8th notes, you get 16th notes. And then if you break up quarter notes, you get 8th notes. And of course, if we break up half notes, we get quarter notes. So this would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and strong, weak, medium, weak. Same thing, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and strong, weak, medium, weak. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Okay. So there is all the groupings and kind of a closer look at the meters we're using. Now notice when I count. Let's take this column for a second. This is not that important for your theory exam, but it's important if you're a performer. So when I'm counting these, you notice the numbers didn't change. This, if I'm subdividing, I'm counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if I'm a pianist, so if I'm playing the piano and I'm playing and I'm counting out loud, it'd be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Beat 1 is strong, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. I would be saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and in 4/8 time. If I was in 4/4 time, I would also be saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And if I was in 4/2 time, I would also be saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Some people find that confusing because here I'm saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but I'm counting 16th notes. Here I'm saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but I'm counting 8th notes. And down here I'm saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, but I'm counting quarter notes. So this number, the way I count when I'm performing, depends on the top number, not the bottom number. Okay? So we get our counting patterns when we're practicing and we're counting out loud. If your teacher asks you to count out loud, your counting pattern depends on the top number, not the bottom number. Okay? So even though the note values have changed, if I'm performing, so going 1, 2, 3, 4, strong, weak, medium, weak, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The beat emphasis stays the same. Okay, that is 90% of the meters you need to know. The only one I didn't include on this board is 6/8 time, and I'm going to show you that one later. And now it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for, how to fill in rests. Here we go. I'm going to draw a bunch of diagrams, and it might help you to find a white piece of paper right now and draw them with me so that you don't forget in a notebook or something. So, we learned about meters that are grouped into 2 beats, 3 beats, and 4 beats. And in this course, when we're subdividing things, we are going to be subdividing into 2 things, 3 things, or 4 things. So I'm going to make diagrams with 2s, 3s, and 4s. So here's a group of 2 things. There's 2 black dots. And here's these 3 black dots represent a group of 3 things, and over here I will draw 4 black dots for when we are working with a group of 4 anythings, whether it's 4 note values in a subdivision or a meter that is split into 4 pulses. So, ready? Here we go. When filling out rests in a group of 4 things, whenever you have 4 things in a meter, 4 subdivisions or 4 groupings, you can attach the front 2 in a rest, you can attach the back 2 in a rest, you can attach the whole thing into one gigantic rest, but you cannot attach the middle 2. So, when you have a group of 4 things, these 2 can be attached together in a rest, these 2 can be attached in a rest, all 4 of them can be attached together in a rest, but in between where my head is, in between my 2 hands, you cannot attach the rests there. Okay? And we will practice that and it will become clear in time, but for now, just copy down that diagram. Now let's think about groups of 3 things. Doesn't matter, 3 subdivisions or 3 groups within a meter. Here's the rules. You can attach the front 2 pulses into a group, into one rest. You can attach the entire bar or the entire group of 3 things into one rest, but you cannot attach the back 2 in a group of 3 things. So you have 3 things in front of you, whether it's the big group in the meter or you've subdivided and you've ended up with a group of 3 things. You can attach the front 2 together in a rest, you can attach all of them together in a rest, but you cannot attach the back 2. Why? Because it's hard for the musician to read, again. And a group of 2 is the easiest. You can group 2 together. If you have a group of 2 things, whether it's a beat that's been subdivided into 2s, or it's just 2 groups in a meter, you can attach it all together in one rest. You're probably wondering what I'm talking about. I will now show you. Let's do something in the easiest meter. Let's do 4/4 time, because we all play music in 4/4 time all the time. I will just make up a question that you might get on your exam right now. So you might get a question on your exam that looks something like this. So the question will say, here's a bar of 4/4, there's 1/16th note at the beginning, there's 1/16th note at the end, and we need you to fill in the rests here. So, here's how we do it. Step 1 is to write the groupings of the meter underneath the question, in the blank space underneath the question, so that you can see and keep track of what you're actually doing. So let's do that right now. The grouping for 4/4 time, there are 4 quarter notes in this bar. 1 quarter note, 2 quarter notes, 3 quarter notes, 4 quarter notes. Now, step 2 is to finish the outer groupings first, okay? So, we need to finish this grouping first and that grouping first. Don't worry about the middle. Whenever we're doing these questions, we always work from the outsides in, okay? So it doesn't matter whether it's this group first or that group first, as long as we're going outside in. Let's start with this group first. We need to add rests here to finish this first pulse in 4/4 time. We have a 16th note. To make this easy, I know that I'm going to write 16th notes down here. I'm going to subdivide my grouping diagram beneath the question into 16th notes, so it's easy for me to see what on earth I am doing. So I know that there are 4 16th notes in this 1 quarter note. So, here's a 16th note, there's a 16th note. 1/16th note has already been taken care of. I don't have to worry about this 16th note. Now, to finish this group, there are 3 16th notes left over. Now, how many 16th notes are there? There was 1, 2, 3, 4. Before I crossed that out, there was 4. So, I need to look at my diagram when dealing with a subdivision of 4 things. I can attach the front 2, the back 2, the whole thing, or not the middle 2. So let's do this now. I'm working with the 2 back 16th notes and 1 of the ones from the front. I can't attach the middle 2, so these 2 16th notes cannot be put together in one rest. They cannot be combined in one rest. So I have to put this one up here on its own, like this. There's 1/16th rest for that 1/16th note. It's crossed off. Now I have 2 left over. I look at my diagram and I notice I am allowed to attach the back 2 in a group of 4. So I can combine these 2, and you should combine them because it's easy for the musician to read. So 2 16th notes when combined into a rest equal an 8th rest. And then I cross them off, and then I can cross this off. That is the first group. Just as an aside, there were 3 16th notes here. A lot of students put this. That's the wrong answer. And this is the wrong answer because it combines the middle two. Okay, so if you were watching me do that and you thought, why didn't I just put a dotted eighth? You cannot combine the middle two. That's why. That's wrong. Okay? We've done one outer group. We can't go here yet because we haven't finished step 2, which said we have to finish the outer groups first. So now we're working with this other group because it's on the outside. We work on the outsides in. Now let's finish this one. Let's do the same thing, and to make it easy on our eyes, I'm going to subdivide this into 16th notes. Because I was given a 16th note in the question, I'm going to subdivide my quarter note into 4/16 so it's easy for me to see what on earth I am doing. Okay, so I know there are 4/16 notes in a quarter note. One has been taken care of already, and I know that I'm dealing with a group of 4 things, so my eyes are going to be looking at my diagram with my diagram that tells me about how you attach 4 things. Okay, so 1 is gone. Now I have 3 left over. Now, can I attach these 3 things together? No, because if you look at the diagram, the middle 2 cannot be attached together. So, I cannot combine these 2 within the rest. So this one has to be put on its own. So I'll use a 16th rest there to get rid of that 16th. I have 2 left over. They're the front 2 in the grouping. I look at my diagram. I notice that I can actually combine the front 2 in a group of 4. I can combine those, and if I take these 2 16ths and combine them into one rest, I get an 8th rest, and there it is. Cross off, cross off. This group is done. Hooray for me. So that's the end of step 2. I finished the outer groups first, and I did that. I had to subdivide into groups of 4, and I made sure to never attach the middle 2. So we were working with groups of 4 on a really tiny microscopic level. Now we zoom out and we once again are dealing with a group of 4 things. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have to now fill in the middle 2. We have 2 quarter notes left over. They happen to be the middle 2 in a group of 4, and again, we cannot attach the middle 2 in a group of 4. Ay, 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 ay. So, what are we going to do? There's 2 possibilities. There's one possibility, but I'm going to show you what students who aren't paying attention would do. Students who weren't paying attention to their diagram would just do this. They would write in a half rest for these 2 quarter notes. That's not right because it combines them and they are in the middle. So that's also wrong. In order to do this, we cannot combine them, we just have to put them on their own. They just have to be by themselves, they cannot be combined. So, one rest that represents a quarter note is a quarter rest, obviously. Cross it off. And one rest that represents this quarter note is again a quarter rest. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the answer to... Let's continue to fill in rests, and this time let's use a diagram that represents 2 things. So in this case, let's do 3, 2, or we'll do 2, 2 time. Cut time. Okay, so let's say we have a question on the exam, and we have to fill in rest in a bar of 2, 2. I will put quarter note here, and I'll put a difficult 16th note triplet over here, so we learn how to deal with that thing. And here's our bracket, so we have to fill in the rests here, and we are going to be using diagrams up here to do that. So, first, step 1 when filling in rest is to write the groupings underneath. So the groupings for 2, 2 time, there are 2 half notes. So underneath here we have to write 2 half notes. Here's 1 half note, 2 half notes. Okay, so there are 2 groups in this meter. Step 2 is to finish the outer groups first. there are no inner groups in this meter, so we're just going to fill from the outside in, just with normal, and there's nothing in the middle, so that doesn't matter too much. Let's start with this side, because this is scaring me, so we'll start with the easy side first to try and get some marks. So I will subdivide, I'm going to have to subdivide my diagram so it's easier to see. So I know we have a quarter note here, and I know that there are 2 quarter notes in this half note, so I'll draw them small up here so I can see properly. Okay, so now we have to finish this group. So lucky for me, there's already a quarter note there, so that can be crossed out. And there's 1 quarter note left over, therefore there's nothing to attach, we don't have to worry. In a group of 2, it doesn't matter, so we can just write 1 rest that represents this 1 quarter note up here, and the group will be done. So 1 rest that represents this quarter note is a quarter rest. And that group is done. That's an easy one. Now if we look over here, this is a little bit more difficult, because we can't even start finishing this group until we know what this note value is. Now you remember when we're figuring out note values of triplets, a triplet is worth the note value 1 higher than what you're actually seeing. So we're seeing 16th notes here because it's a 16th note triplet. 1 note value higher than a 16th note is an 8th note. Therefore this triplet 16th is worth 1/8 note. Now I'm going to have to, in my diagram below the question, to make this easy to do, I'm going to have to subdivide this all the way up to the level of 8th notes so that I can properly see what I'm doing. So if we subdivide this on 1 layer, we get quarter notes. And then if you subdivide that again, if you subdivide the quarter notes, we figure out that we are working actually with 4/8 notes. So we've had to subdivide this 2 layers down. Okay, so we just figured out that this triplet 16th note is worth 1/8 note. So I can cross off 1/8 note. That's done. Now let's finish this subdivision. There's 1/8 note left over. In order to finish just this half of the group, I will put an 8th rest to get rid of that 1/8 note in my diagram. So there's an 8th rest that's crossed out. Now this is crossed out, so half of this group is done. Now over on this side, we have to finish the front half of that group. There's nothing here. Here's 2 things. I know that in my diagram of 2 things, it's okay to combine 2 things. That would mean I can combine these 2 8th notes into a rest that represents a quarter note. So a rest that represents a quarter note is a quarter rest. Cross out, cross out, cross out, cross out. I forgot to cross these out, and I'm done. There's an example of filling in rests in a meter that has 2 large groupings. Okay, for the last section of our whiteboard video, and to prove my worth as a theory teacher, I am going to show you how to write groupings in 3/4 versus 6/8 time. I've chosen these 2 meters because actually they're the same length. 3/4 time has 6/8 notes in it, and 6/8 time obviously has 6/8 notes in it. So in reality, they're the same length. But now that you know your groupings and your meters, you know that they're not the same meter because they're grouped differently. And in fact, on your exam, if you're doing a level 5 exam, 6/8 is the only compound meter you need to know. And a compound meter, again, is when you subdivide into groups of 3s rather than even numbers in simple meter. Let's do 3/4 first. I'm going to fill in the rests using our diagrams. Then I'm going to come over here and fill in the rest in a bar of 6/8, and you're going to see just how different they are despite being the same length. Okay, so step 1 to filling in a meter is to write the groupings underneath. So the grouping for 3 4 time 3 quarter notes in each bar is there's 3 groups, and each group is worth a quarter note. So there's 1 quarter note, 2 quarter notes, 3 quarter notes. All right. Step 2 is to fill in the outer groupings first. Work from the outside in. Let's start from this side. So over here, the question has given me a dotted 8th note. Remember, a dot is half of whatever comes before it, and half of an 8th note is a 16th note. So down below in my diagram, I think I should subdivide into 16th notes right away so that I can clearly see what I'm doing. So there are 4 16th notes in a quarter note. There they are. Now, how many 16ths are we actually looking at in the question? There's 1 16th note here, and there's 2 16th notes here. 1 plus 2 is 3, so we can already go ahead and cross off 3 of these 16th notes because they're already there. And in order to finish this grouping, I see there's only 1 16th left, and I can just put a 16th rest there to get rid of that. There's a 16th rest, gone. And this grouping is gone. We have to complete step 2 by finishing the outer groupings. This is the other outer grouping. So now we have to, again, we'll do this all over again. We'll figure out how many are the note value of a 16th note triplet. A triplet is worth 1 note value greater than what you're actually seeing. So this is, we see 16th notes. The note value greater than a 16th note is an 8th note. Therefore, this triplet 16th is actually worth 1 8th note. So I will just go ahead and subdivide this into 8th notes rather than 16ths. I don't need to work with 16ths for this group, for this subdivision over here. There's 2 8th notes in a quarter. That's worth 1 8th note. This is gone. Now we only have 1 left. And I can just go ahead and eliminate it by putting the rest that's equal to this. This is an 8th note, and an 8th note is equal to an 8th rest. That's gone. Cross out. And now we only have 1 group in the middle. There's nothing to attach, so we don't have to worry about our diagram problems. We can just put 1 rest for this whole group, and 1 rest for a quarter note is a quarter rest. There we go. That's the right answer. 3 4 time. That is how the groupings look. Now, here's the exact same. This is the exact same rhythm in a group of 6 8. But the groupings are different, and therefore the rests are going to look different. So now let's move over to the bar of 6 8. The grouping for 6 8 time is 2 groups of 3 8th notes. 2 groups of 3. 1 2 3 4 5 6, like that. So this is the diagram you would write underneath your question on your exam if you're doing a question of 6 8th notes. 1 2 3 4 5 6. On the big layer, it's strong, weak. We're hearing 2s. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. And on the tinier layer, we're hearing strong, weak, weak. Strong, weak, weak. Those are supposed to be W's. Actually, this is going to be medium, weak, weak. Strong, weak, weak, medium, weak, weak. Strong, weak, weak, medium, weak, weak. So that's the grouping for 6 8. So, look over here. There are 2 8th notes in this, 2 8th notes in that quarter note, and 2 8th notes in that quarter note. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Sorry, 1 2 3 4 5 6. I don't know why I counted to 8. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6 8th notes. So there are 6 8th notes in here and 6 8th notes in there, but as you can see, because of the meter, they are grouped differently, and therefore our rests are going to look different. Let's go ahead and fill out the rests. So here again we have a dotted 8th note. I know a dot is half of whatever came before it, so a dot is half of an 8th note. Half of an 8th note is a 16th note. So I'm going to go ahead and subdivide this into 16th notes. So that is actually that. So that's already been taken care of. So I'm going to subdivide these first two 1/8 notes into 16th notes, and I'll do it all for all three just to be clear. So I've subdivided this group into 3 pairs of 16th notes. Now let's eliminate what's already there. These two 16th notes are already in the question because that's 1/8 note, so this is gone, which means this is gone. And now this is worth 1/16th note, so this 16th note is gone. And in order to finish this pulse of the group, we need to get rid of that 1/16th note, and we can do that with a 16th rest. So that's that group gone, and that is now gone. Now, we have one more 1/8 in order to finish our first group. Okay, and there's two 16th notes. We didn't have to do this, but we will anyways. We subdivided it anyways. There's a group of 2 things. We know we can attach the whole thing, so that can be attached into an 1/8, into a 1/8 rest. So that's that. Now, we're not even done the question, but look, compare back to the other bar. This is not the same thing. Okay, the different groupings in the meters has already changed the way we've applied our rests. Here there is a 16th rest, and then quarter rest for this. Here, this is already different. This is an 1/8 rest, and we finished this whole group. Now let's work this way from the outside in for this last group. So, a 16th note triplet. A triplet is worth 1 note value greater than what you're seeing. A 16th, 1 note value greater than a 16th note is an 1/8 note. So, this is worth 1/8 note. So we can go ahead and cross this off. 1/8 note has been taken care of us by the question. Now we have a group of 3 things. Let's look up here to our diagram when we're dealing with 3s. Can we attach these 2 together in one rest, or do we have to put one rest for each of those 1/8 notes? Can we put a quarter rest for both of them, or do we have to put 2 1/8 rests? Let's check and see. We are allowed to attach the front 2 in a group of 3, but not the back 2. These are the front 2. We are allowed to attach them, and 2 1/8 go into a quarter rest. Cross out, and that's the answer. So, here's a bar of 3, 4. It has 6 1/8 notes in it. Here's a bar of 6, 8. It has 6 1/8 notes in it. This is simple meter. This is compound meter. They are different because they are grouped differently. This one sounds like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. This one sounds like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We live in America. Hemiolas. The key component to doing these questions is knowing the groups for each meter so that you can actually write down the diagram underneath the question you are writing, and to know these by heart. Okay? So you have to know your diagrams by heart. You have to know that in a group of 4 you cannot attach the middle 2. You have to know that in a group of 3 you cannot attach the back 2. And you have to know in a group of 2 you can attach whatever, you can attach both of them, and you need to be able to know the diagrams that apply for each meter. For those of you who are older watching this video and are more advanced, if you look in the textbook, essentially what these diagrams mean is that you cannot attach a rest that begins with a pulse that's on a weak beat. Okay, so if you're an advanced student, you don't have to memorize these diagrams. You can just think, if the group starts on a weak beat, you cannot attach them. Okay, but for visual learners like me, I think these diagrams are better. So copy those down in your notebook and memorize the groupings that go with each meter, and you should be okay. Okay, so here we are with the homework worksheet again, which you can download if you want and do it before you watch this video. I'll say it again. The rhythm chapter and curriculum for the RCM level 5 exam, if you're doing that, is probably the toughest question. And I expect that a lot of you will have to watch this video 2 or 3 times before you get it. So I will try to do a good job. I even have a glass of water because I'm going to be talking a lot. So I'm going to go slow. First question. Add the missing bar lines. Remember to add a double bar line at the end. Now before we do anything, if you actually are doing an RCM Level 5 theory exam, there's actually a mistake in the glossary at the end of the book. A double bar line looks like this. Okay? I'll put one there. There's a double bar line. That's what a double bar line looks like. Now, this down here is a final bar line. Okay, those are two different things. A double bar line is used to show the end of a section in a piece of music, whereas a final bar line is used to show the end of an entire piece. Now, if you open the book, if you open your Level 5 theory book and look in the glossary, they say that this is a double bar line. That's wrong. So you should know that. This is a final bar line, and this is a double bar line. So don't get those two things mixed up. Okay, so first question, they've given us the time signature, and we have to fill in where the bar lines should be. Okay, so here's the clues to figuring out how we are going to go about doing this. 3/4. The groupings for 3/4 is 3 quarter notes in a bar. Okay? So, we are going to count. And again, I'm using pen. Don't do this at home. Use a pencil at home. So we know that 4 16th notes go into 1 quarter note, so that could be 1 beat. There's an 8th rest, there's an 8th rest and an 8th note. We know that 2 8th notes is equivalent to 1 quarter, so that could be 1 beat, 2 beats, and this is a triplet 8th, and a triplet 8th. We know that a triplet 8th is worth 1 quarter note, so there's going to be a bar line here. This is 1 beat, that's the first quarter note. This is the second beat, second quarter note, and this is the third beat, third quarter note. So we can go ahead and write a bar line in there. And of course, when you're doing this at home, you could do it with a pencil. So if you did make a mistake, you could erase it after. Okay, let's figure out the next length. So again, we need 3 quarter notes because we're in 3/4 time, 3 quarter notes. So there's 1 quarter note, that's easy, that's 1. Here's an 8th and 2 16ths. I know that this 8th separates into 2 16ths. It's a really badly drawn 16th note. And 4 16ths make 1 quarter note, so this whole thing is 1 quarter note. So there's 1 quarter note, and then there's 2 quarter notes. And now we have 2 8th notes, and I know that 2 8th notes also make up a quarter note. So there we go. There's 1, 2, 3, and then a bar line goes here. Okay, next one. There's a 16th, there's a group of 4 16ths. Again, I know that there are 4 16ths in 1 quarter note, so there's 1. Here's 2 8th notes. I know that there are 2 8th notes in 1 quarter note, so there's 2. And then we have a quarter rest, so there's the 3 groups. 1, 2, 3. And the rest would go here. Okay. And now it looks like this is already done for us, but let's just check. There would be beat 1, that's 1 quarter note. A 16th triplet is worth 1 8th note. And it's also been attached to 1 8th note. So this is an 8th note and that's an 8th note, so 2 8th notes make 1 quarter. That's the second beat of the bar, and then there's the third beat. So 1, 2, 3. And this is the right answer. Okay? I can clap this for you. 1, rest, rest. Okay. Question number 2. They've given us the bar lines, but we have to figure out what the time signatures actually are. This is a little tricky, and we have to be detectives now and use a bunch of clues. Okay? The clues are as followed. First thing we're going to do is we are going to find the simplest bar of music and figure out the length of that bar. Then something else we can do is we can look at the beaming system how the beams are written to try and figure out how the groupings within the meter work. We can figure out, another thing we can do is we can figure out whether the groups can be divisibles into 2s or 3s. If the groups are divisible into even numbers, like 2s, then it will be simple meter, and if the groups are divisible into groups of 3s, then it will be compound meter. And the last thing we're going to do is make sure that the time signature, once we've chosen it, is that it applies to every bar. So let's start with the first one. Let's find the simplest bar of music. Something's not right here. My computer screwed something up. So we're going to pretend that's not there, and I'll fix it on when you download this sheet, that won't be there. We'll pretend the question ends here. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll go from here to here. This question is now this long. Alright, so let's find the simplest bar of meter. Let's find the simplest bar of music. I think this is the simplest bar of music. There's one dotted quarter note, okay? If I break this up, we get 3 eighth notes. Okay. 1, 2, 3 eighth notes fit into that single symbol. Okay. So this is divisible by 3s, so that's a good hint that we are working in compound meter. Let's see if every other bar also has 3 eighth notes in it. Can we fit this in that one? Well, there's 1 eighth note. 2 16th notes make another eighth note. And then these 2 16th notes make another eighth note there. So that works. Let's figure out this bar. There's 1 eighth note. There's another eighth note for that eighth rest, and these 2 16th notes can make another eighth note. So there's 3 eighth notes, 3 eighth notes, and I'm pretty sure this last bar has 3 eighth notes too. Let's see. So there's 1 eighth note plus a dot. A dot is half of whatever came before it. So this dot is a 16th note. There's a 16th note there, there's a 16th note there. If you combine these 2 16th notes, you get an eighth. So there's 1 eighth, 2 eighths, 3 eighths. Okay, good. So every bar of music has 3 eighth notes in it. So they're based on the grouping, based on the amount of eighth notes, and based on the groupings, we can say that this is in 3 8 time. 3 eighth notes. Alright, let's do the next one. This one's a little tougher. So, first thing we should do is find the simplest bar of music, and then we might have to look at the beaming system. So, where's the simplest bar? This bar looks very simple. Now, some of you probably haven't seen this symbol before. This is a double whole note, also known as a breve. Okay, they used it in medieval music. We don't really use it anymore. I've never seen it in music other than medieval music, to be quite honest. Maybe it's in modern choral music, perhaps. Anyways, the textbook wants you to know it, so I put it there. So this is equal to 2 whole notes. So it's 8 quarter notes in that one bar. So in this bar, we have 8 quarter notes. 8/4 is not a popular time signature, and it's not one we learned in this course, so we'll assume for now that the line of music is not in 8/4. However, let's just test our theory and make sure there are actually 8 quarter notes in each bar. So that would be, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that one has 8 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That has 8 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so every bar in this exercise has 8 quarter notes. Fine. Now, is there an easier way to divide these? Let's look at the beams and try to figure out what groups, what amount of quarter notes are in each group. So let's look at this bar. There's a group of 2 quarter notes, a group of 2 quarter notes. This could be a group of 2 quarter notes, and this could be a group of 2 quarter notes. So there's 2 quarter notes in there, there's 2 quarter notes in there, there's 2 quarter notes in there, and there's 2 quarter notes for these two. There's 1 group, 2 group, 3 group, 4 group. Okay. So there's 4 groupings, perhaps. Let's check this bar and see if there's 4 groupings. We can put 1, 2... 2 groups can fit in there, that's fine. And then this would be a group. And this would be a group. This bar is also grouped in 4s. And can we group this one in 4s? There's 4 quarter notes here. There's 3 quarter notes in this. And there's the 4th one. That could be 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups. So each bar is grouped in... Each bar contains 4 groups, and in each group there's 2 quarter notes. Oy vey. So, 2 quarter notes make a half note. There are 4 half notes in each bar. Is it possible that the time signature is 4-2? If you just said yes, you're right. That was a little bit, well, that was a lot of work. Now, how did we figure that out? We counted the amount of beats, we grouped them into larger groups, and we made sure that we were in simple time and not compound time. We're in simple time because our groups contain even numbers of beats. If we were in compound time, these are groupings that we found would have had odd numbers, like 3s. Okay, so the answer is 4-2. Last question for question 2. Alright, step 1 is to find the easiest bar of music. I'm scared of this thing. This thing scares me. There's a syncopation there. Oh, that looks nice. So let's say that this is our simplest bar of music. And that's also not supposed to be there. Ignore that. Question ends here. So this is our simplest bar of music. Already, before we even have to count, I can see that based on the beams of this bar, we are in simple time. And I know that because this looks like a group and this looks like a group, and there's an even number of beats in each group, which means we're not in compound time. So it can't be 6-8 or 3-8 or something like that. We are definitely in simple meters. So perhaps it's going to be 2-4, 3-4, or 4-4. So I know that these 4 16th notes make 1 quarter, and I know that these 4 16th notes make 1 quarter, and I know that there are 2 quarter notes in that half note. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 quarter notes, perhaps we're in 4-4 time. Based on this bar, we suspect we're in 4-4 time. That's fine. Let's just confirm it with the other bars. We'll work backwards, okay? So these 2 eighth notes make 1 quarter note. There's a 16th, a 16th, and then an 8th note. And an 8th note has 2 16ths. So there's 1 16th, 2 16ths, 4 16ths, and I know that 4 16ths make a quarter note. That's obviously a quarter note. And then this is 2 eighth notes. The photocopier has destroyed my homework assignment. 2 eighth notes make a quarter note. Oh look, there's also 4 quarter notes in that bar. Okay, so that's looking good for us. Let's double check with this bar. This is a quarter note plus a dot. A dot, it means half of whatever came before it. Therefore, this dot is an 8th note. So this is a quarter note. That dot is an 8th note, and there's an 8th note here. 2 8th notes equal another quarter note. We have 2 quarter notes so far, and this is a quarter note triplet, and you know that triplets equal the next note value up. So the next note value up from a triplet is a half note. So all of these 3 quarter note, this quarter note triplet thing equals a half note. And 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 4. Okay, so 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. And we're pretty sure this is 4, 4. Here's a 16th note triplet. Remember, a triplet equals 1 note value higher than what it actually is, so 3 16th triplets equal an 8th note. There's an 8th note, and there's another 8th note. 2 8th notes equal a quarter note, so this is 1 quarter note. There's 2 8th notes, that equals a quarter note. And, okay, here's a quarter note. And then there's a dot. This dot is half of whatever came before it, so the dot is a 8th note, because an 8th note is half of a quarter note. And these 2 things are worth an 8th note. Sheesh, this is a lot of work. There's 2 8th notes there, and that equals 1 quarter note. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes. Okay, we are in 4/4 time. Last question, and the most hardest question. Now, I'm not going to do the whole thing. Filling in rests. Now, in order to do this, you already need to know the groupings for each meter. So before you can do this question, you need to already have memorized the groups for the meter. So you already have to know that 2, 2 is 2 half notes, and 4, 4 is 4 quarter notes. You have to know that 3, 8 is 3 8th notes. You need to know 6, 8 time is 2 groups with 3 8th notes in each group. For 4, 2, you need to know that there's 4 half notes. C, remember, means 4, 4 time. It's a shorthand for 4, 4 time. C is common time. 3 quarter notes, 3, 2, 2, 4. Okay, so to do this, this is the hardest question on the exam, in my opinion. So step 1 is to write the groups under the bar. Let's start with this one. The groupings for 2, 2 is 2 half notes. Okay, so we need to add rests under the brackets to fill out this bar. I often like to start from the back. Okay, so let's fill out this last group first. So we can break this half note into 2 quarter notes. Let's finish the first quarter note first. So a quarter note can be, we have a 16th note here. Let's then break this quarter note into 4 16th notes. This is 1 16th note, it's crossed off. Now, we have 3 16th notes left to be put here before we can cross off this whole quarter note. Now remember, in a group of 4 things, you cannot attach the middle 2. You cannot attach these 2. If you put an 8th rest here, you are attaching these 2, that's wrong. So instead, you just have to write 1 16th note and get rid of that. Now we have 2 16th notes left over. In a group of 4 things, it is okay to attach 2 things, or in a group of 4 things, it's okay to attach the front 2. So these 2 16th notes can become 1 8th rest, and now that's gone, and that's our quarter. So we have half of this so far. Now, to make this, to fill this out to the remaining value of the group, the half note, we have 1 quarter note left, and we can just put a quarter rest up there. Scribble that out, scribble that out. Okay, so that's the back half of this bar, all those doodles. Now let's go to the front. We have a quarter note. Let's again break this half note into 2 quarter notes. Okay, there's 1 there, so we can cross this one off for sure. And now we have 1 left over. We can put a quarter rest. And what you see here above the scribbles is the right answer. A quarter note, quarter rest, and then an 8th rest, a 16th rest, and then the 8th. All right, next question. Step 1 is to write out the groups. So the grouping for 4/4 time is 4 quarter notes. You write them out so you can see them so you don't get lost. Let's start from the front of the bar this time. So let's finish the first group, okay? So 1/8 note, or sorry, there are 2/8 notes in a quarter note. So we have 1/8 note here already, so all we need to do is put another 8th rest, and we can cross out this. We finished this group, now let's work from the back group. You always work in this way when you're filling out rests. So let's figure this out now. This is a triplet 8th note. We know that a triplet is worth 1 note of greater value than what you're actually seeing. So these are 8th notes, so the 3 triplet 8th notes are worth 1 quarter note, because a quarter note is 1 note value higher. So this whole thing is worth a quarter note, so actually I can cross that out. Okay, now we are left with 2 quarter notes in the middle. Now you remember the diagram. When you have a group of 4 things, you can attach the front 2, you can attach the back 2, but you cannot attach the middle 2. There were 4 things here, 1, 2, 3, 4. You cannot attach these 2 things because they're in the middle. So if you put a half rest here, that's wrong because you've attached these 2. You need to put a quarter rest up there and a quarter rest up there. And this is the right answer for that question. Do not put a half rest there. Next one, 3/8. Step 1 is to write in the groupings. We have 3 8th notes, and they are all grouped together. Actually, I should have put a beam. It looks bad. This is why you don't use pen. Okay, so we have, we can start with the front or the back. Let's start with the front. We have an 8th note, so that's 1 crossed off. We also have a dot here, and a dot is half of whatever came before it, so half of an 8th note is a 16th, so this dot represents a 16th note. There are 2 16th notes in an 8th rest, so there's 1 gone, and now we just have to add 1 more 16th, and that will equal an 8th note. There's our 16th rest, that's the dot. There's the thing, there's the rest represents that, and that's gone. Sheesh, this is a long video. I'm already getting tired. Okay, and now last grouping, there's a 16th note here. We know that this can be broken into 2 16ths. So let's break it into 2 16ths. There's 1 16th there, cross it off, and now we need another 16th. And that is the right answer for that one. 2 16th rests. 6/8, okay? This is the one I warned you not to get confused with 3/4 time. So the first thing you do is write the groupings in underneath. And the grouping for 6/8 time is 2 groups, and each group has 3 8th notes in them. So on the large scale, you're working with 2 beats, and on the small scale, you're working with 3 beats. We will start with the first group. Okay, here's a 16th note. I know that there are 2 16th notes in that 8th, so there's 1, cross it off, and in order to finish this 8th, we can put another 16th note, cross it off, cross off the 8th. Okay. Now, we're finishing this grouping. We have 2 8th notes back here. Now, you remember, in a group of 3 things, you can attach the front 2, you can attach the whole thing, but you cannot attach the back 2. So, these are the back 2 of the group of 3, so we cannot put them together. 2 8th notes equal a quarter rest, but we can't put a quarter rest up there because that would be attaching them. So instead we have to put 1 rest for each. So a rest for an 8th note is an 8th rest, and a rest for an 8th note is another 8th rest. There we go. cross off, cross off. Let's finish the back group. I know that 2 eighth notes are in this quarter note, so we can cross off those two, and now we are left with 1 eighth, and we can simply put an eighth rest up there. And that is the answer for the 6/8 bar. Next, it's a bar of 4/2. And it's hard to see because the printer destroyed the page. There we go. 4/2. Okay, so first thing we do is write down the groupings. There are 4 half notes in 4/2 time. We could start by finishing the back group, or we could start by finishing the front group. Let's just finish the front group first. So we can split this into, how are we going to do this? We have a quarter note, we have a dotted, and we have a dot. So we have a dotted quarter note. So we're going to be dealing with eighth notes. So let's start by splitting this into 2 quarters. Okay. So this is 1 quarter gone, but the eighth is half of that, so that's an eighth note. So now let's split this quarter into 2 eighth notes. I'll just write dots. And that dot is that crossed out, and now we need 1 more eighth note. That's an eighth rest. We put that there. That's crossed off, that's crossed off. Bang. That is that group. Okay, now we don't do the middle. Now we work from the other end and finish the last group first. So here's a 16th note. Oh dear, we're gonna have to work in 16ths. Okay, so first I'm gonna break this into quarter notes. There are 2 quarter notes into a half note. And then I'll break each of those quarter notes into 2 eighth notes, because there are 2 eighth notes in a quarter. And we know that there's 1/16 in one of those eighths. So if I put a 16th here, I get to cross off 1/8. There's an eighth crossed off. Okay, now to complete this quarter, I need an eighth rest to represent that eighth. Okay, that's crossed off and that's crossed off. I'm halfway there. Now we have 2 eighth notes, and we can combine them into 1 quarter rest. There was a group of 4. We split it up into eighth notes, and there was 4 eighth notes here. So in a group of 4 things, you can attach the front 2. That's okay, I showed you up there. So there's 4 eighth notes, we can attach them. So we'll use 1 quarter rest. For this is gone, this is gone, this is gone. Good. Now we're at the middle. Back to this problem. When you have a group of 4 things, you cannot attach the middle 2. Are there 4 things here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, there were 4 groups. So we cannot attach the middle 2 groups. So we need 1 rest for there and 1 rest for there. If you attach them and put a whole rest, it's wrong. Okay, so for 1 half note we'll put a half rest, and for 1 half note we'll put a half rest. And the half rest goes on this line facing up, and the half rest goes on this line facing up. Next bar. C means 4/4. We'll write in the groups. 1 quarter note, 2 quarter note, 3 quarter note, 4 quarter notes. Now this one doesn't have a rest at the back, so we're going to start from the front and then go this way. We don't need to start backwards from here because there's no rest. Okay, so this is a 16th note triplet, and we know that a triplet is worth 1 greater note value than what you actually see. So these are triplets, these are 16ths. 1 note value bigger than a 16th is an 8th note. So this is worth 1 8th note, and I know that there are 2 8th notes in a quarter, so that's half. There's the 2 8th notes, there was the 1 gone. Now we need 1 more 8th note to finish the quarter, and there it is there. Okay, now we have 3 quarter notes left over. What's the rule? You can attach the front 2, you can attach the back 2, you cannot attach the middle 2. These 2 are the middle 2, they cannot be attached. So these two are the back two. They can be attached. So we're going to attach these and then leave this one on its own. So 2 quarter notes can be represented with a half rest there, and then this can just be represented as a quarter rest. Last line. I might as well do the whole page. Okay, 3, 4. What's the grouping? 3 quarter notes. Notice there's nothing here. I did that on purpose to teach you an important lesson so you don't lose marks. On your exam, when you have an empty bar in this question, all you have to do is write a whole rest. Now, a whole rest is worth 4 beats. It doesn't matter. No matter what time signature you're in, when you have an empty bar and you need to add a rest, you always add a whole rest, okay? It doesn't matter if it's an empty bar in 4-2, it doesn't matter if it's an empty bar in 3-8, it doesn't matter if it's an empty bar in 2-2. On this question, the filling in the rest question on your exam, you get an empty bar, all you do is write a whole rest in it. It's the box on the 3rd space hanging down, and that is the right answer. Even though it's technically wrong because this is worth 4 quarter notes and only 3 quarter notes go into a bar, it's what you do. Okay, last 2 questions. 3-2 time and 2-4 time. What's the grouping for 3-2? 3 half notes. Okay. This is an 1/8. This is a dot. It's a dotted 1/8. A dot represents half of whatever came before it. That means this is a 16th, because a 16th is half of an 1/8. So we are going to have to do some subdividing on our diagram. So 2 quarter notes go into the half note, and then we can break these 2 quarter notes into 4 1/8 notes. And we're going to be working with groups of 4 things. So there's an 1/8 note, there's an 1/8 note, that's 1 gone. This is a 16th note. A 16th note is half of this 1/8 note. So what can we put here to finish this 1/8 note? We can put a 16th rest. That's that 16th plus that 16th gets this cross off. There's 1 quarter note gone. Okay, now we have 1 quarter note left over. This was a group of 4 things, and this is the back 2. We can combine the beats in the back, so we'll just put a quarter rest. That's gone. That's gone. Foo. Okay, now we have 2 more half notes, okay? Now, on this level here, we were dealing with groups of 4 things, so we used the rules that apply to groups of 4 things. But on the larger level, 1, 2, 3, this is a group of 3 things, so we're going to be looking at this diagram. Can we attach the back 2? Can we use 1 whole rest for these 2 back beats? Let's see. You can attach the front 2, you can attach the whole thing, but you cannot attach the back 2. So no, this was the back 2 of a group of 3 things. You can't attach them, so we need 1 rest for this half note and 1 rest for that half note. Half note can be a half rest, and half note can be a half rest. Done. That's the right answer. Hooray, the last question. I didn't even drink my water. Okay. 2-4 time. What's the group? 2 quarter notes. Looks like we're going to be dealing with 16ths because this dot represents half of whatever came before it. It came after an 1/8, and half of an 1/8 is a 16th, so there's write out 4 16ths for 1 quarter note. 4 16ths for 1 quarter note. Okay. How many 16ths do we see here? There's 2 16ths in that 1/8 note, and there's 1 16th here. So 3 of them already got crossed off. There's 1 left over to finish the first group, and we can just put a 16th rest there, and then that's that whole group gone. Okay, finish from the back. There's 1 16th, so that's this 16th gone. Now we have 3 16ths left over. This is a group of 4 things. Look at the 4 diagram. We cannot attach the middle 2, So this one has to be left on its own. We can attach the front two, and we'll put these two together. So this one will be its own 16th rest. And then we can attach these two on the front, and that is a 8th. Hooray! Now, look at all this writing. That's a ton of diagram work to complete this question. If you are doing the level 5 RCM exam, you have to practice this rhythm. I think this is the toughest one. Once you get the pattern, once you've practiced, it's easy. But it's a lot of work to start out with. I mean, look this homework page looks like a catastrophe. It looks like a mess. So if you are using my video course to study for an exam, you're gonna have to do this all the time. You're gonna have to practice this at least on a weekly basis. So no matter what unit and what videos you're watching at any time, if you're preparing for my exam, please always come back to the rhythm questions and keep practicing and study these diagrams. You have to know the diagrams, you have to know the groupings of the meter, and this question on the RCM exam is worth 10 marks, which doesn't sound like much, but well, it is. 10 marks is a lot, so make sure you do it. Hi everyone, this is the part of the video where I talk about all the strange and bizarre things I've seen my students do over the years in class, and that they've lost marks for on their exam and they didn't have to. And everything I'm going to show you today actually has to do with these two symbols. The half rest and the whole rest. First of all, let's just figure out how to not get these two things confused. How can you tell which one is the half rest and which one is the whole rest, since they look so similar? What I do with my little kids is I say, here's a bunny, hop, 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 trampoline, goes up. And then I tell my little kids, here's a bunny, hop, 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 falls down into the whole of the whole rest. Okay, so when a bunny hops and falls down into the whole, this is a whole rest, and this looks more like a trampoline, this is a half rest. So a whole rest is a whole rest because a bunny can fall through and die an untimely death. So that's the first way you cannot get these things messed up. Now, one thing I see all the time and kids lose marks is they, first of all, don't even know where to put half rests and whole rests. I've seen half rests and whole rests up here, up there, down here, everywhere. Whole rests and half rests always go on the third line up. Okay, so a whole rest hangs off the top, and a half rest sits on the bottom. There's the bunny, he falls through the hole. Now, do not do this. I've seen kids who didn't sharpen their pencil and they write a gigantic box that is touching both the top line and the bottom line. If you write something like this, the examiner can't tell whether it's a whole rest or a half rest, right? It could be both. You have to make sure that you leave a little bit of white on top or below so the examiner knows what they're actually looking at. And the last thing I want to show you for the common mistakes is right down here. I said this in the previous section of the video in case you missed it. Here is an empty bar, okay? I did this on purpose. When I designed this homework sheet, I had questions with filling in the rests, and each one of these questions has an actual note that you have to dodge, but this one down here I intentionally left blank, and that's because a lot of students, if they were to see this, they might write something like this. They might write a dotted half rest, because that's worth 3/4 notes, and they would put it up there, and they would say, oh, to fill out this bar, we write we might write a rest that represents 3 beats. That is not correct. Whenever you have a bar with nothing in it, you need to just write a whole rest. Now, a whole rest is technically worth 4 beats. However, it doesn't matter. When you have an empty bar of any time signature, doesn't matter if it's 3-2, an empty bar of 2-4, an empty bar of common time, an empty bar of 4-2, doesn't matter. You just write whole rest no matter what the time signature is. So this isn't right. Empty bars get whole rests no matter what. You see an empty bar, you put a whole rest in. And one more thing. This C obviously means 4 for time. C means common. Sometimes students get confused because they don't recognize that C means common. Because 4/4 time is the meter we use most, we use a C to just represent that in old-fashioned music. And last thing, if you see a C like this, if you see a C but it has a slash through it, that equals cut time, which is music slang for 2-2. Alright, so if you see a C, it's 4/4. If you see a C with a dash through it, it's 2-2. Make sure you understand the difference between a half rest and a whole rest, and make sure you know where they go, and make sure to not draw a gigantic box. The examiner won't like that. And make sure if you have an empty bar of rest, you just put a single whole rest. And that is the end of the rhythm video. I think that's going to be the longest video I ever make. I think we're up to like 1 hour and 40 minutes. But I don't care, I'm not going to shorten it. This is hard and you guys need a lot of practice. So if you have to watch this video in sections and then go eat dinner and then come back and then go watch a movie and then come back, that's fine. It's a video, we can do whatever we want. But everything I said was important, and I do not believe it was redundant. So I hope you guys do well on your rhythm questions from now on. And of course, you can go to our website and download this homework sheet and practice and do it. And maybe you've bought a textbook and you can practice again in there. Alright, good luck with that.